There was a time in Earth's history when the air itself seemed to hum with wings, when forests shimmered with green light and the ground pulsed under the weight of creatures so strange they could have come from another planet. This was the Carboniferous Period, more than 300 million years ago, a forgotten era of giants. It was an age when dragonflies were the size of eagles, centipedes stretched longer than cars, and every breath you took could have ignited into flame. The Carboniferous world was both paradise and nightmare. The continents were still drifting toward one another, forming a patchwork of swamps, rivers, and dense jungles. The air was thick with moisture, and oxygen made up more than a third of the atmosphere, nearly twice what we breathe today. It was this abundance of oxygen that fueled a biological explosion unlike anything before or since. Insects and amphibians grew enormous, trees towered without flowers, and decay itself moved slowly, letting the earth store carbon deep beneath the soil. The world had never been so alive or so strange. Imagine walking through one of those forests. The first thing you would notice is the air. It would feel heavy, like breathing through velvet. The sky would appear dim, the sun filtered through canopies of towering club mosses and ferns, some as tall as modern buildings. Their trunks were not wood as we know it, but fibrous layers of plant tissue, rough and wet to the touch. Spores drifted through the air like dust motes, coating everything in a faint green haze. On the forest floor, giant horsetails rose from pools of stagnant water, and strange fungi glowed faintly in the shadows. The smell would be a mix of decay and sweetness, rotting vegetation mixed with the perfume of wet earth. Every surface crawled with life. Insects covered the bark, the ground, and even the air, and overhead, wings the size of dinner plates glinted in the faint light. Among these strange creatures was the ruler of the skies, Meganeura, the giant dragonfly. With a wingspan stretching over 2.5 feet, it would have dwarfed any bird of prey. Its translucent wings shimmered in hues of bronze and green as it glided silently through the humid air. Its enormous compound eyes could see movement in every direction, and when it spotted prey, a smaller insect or even a young amphibian, it swooped with astonishing precision. Its legs, spined and sharp, clasped the victim midair before its jaws tore it apart. To witness a swarm of Meganeura in flight would have been both beautiful and terrifying, like a storm of glass and muscle. But the dragonflies were only part of the story. Below them, on the dark forest floor, moved creatures that looked like nightmares brought to life. The largest of them was Arthroplura, a colossal millipede that could reach more than 8 feet in length. It slithered slowly through the undergrowth, its dozens of jointed legs moving in smooth, rippling waves. Its body was covered in overlapping armor plates, black and glossy like obsidian. Though it likely fed on decaying plants rather than flesh, its size alone would have made it seem monstrous. Imagine kneeling to tie your shoe and hearing the faint rhythmic clicking of countless legs approaching through the leaves. The ground itself was alive. Crickets the size of mice leapt between moss-covered logs, while early scorpions and spiders patrolled the damp soil. Some scorpions, like Pulmonoscorpius, reached more than a foot in length and hunted anything smaller than themselves. Even the air buzzed constantly. In this world of dense jungles and thick oxygen, flight had become one of evolution's favorite tricks. Every shape of wing, from the delicate to the armored, filled the skies. The swamps were equally crowded. Shallow waters reflected the green canopy above and were home to lungfish, amphibians, and the ancestors of reptiles. The creatures of this age were transitional, caught between the sea and the land. Some still carried gills, others lungs, and a few had both. The amphibians ruled here, ranging from small, salamander-like hunters to massive predators like Protorogerinus, whose long jaws and crocodile-like body made it the terror of shallow pools. In the deeper parts of the swamp, strange fish-like creatures lurked among fallen logs. Their bodies were covered with thick scales like armor, and they moved slowly, ambushing anything that strayed too close. Every inch of the Carboniferous world seemed designed to test the limits of size and survival. Evolution, drunk on oxygen, was experimenting freely. If you looked up through the haze, you might catch sight of enormous plants with spore cones at their tops, lepidodendron trees, often mistaken for palms in old illustrations. These trees dominated the Carboniferous forests. Some grew more than 100 feet tall, their trunks patterned with diamond-shaped scars left by fallen leaves. Beneath them, calamites, ancient relatives of horsetails, rose like bamboo, forming dense groves. When the wind passed through, Their hollow stems produced low, eerie tones, like the breath of a sleeping giant. The landscape was alien yet beautiful. The light filtering through the canopy was greenish and dim, and everything seemed to move, spores drifting, leaves trembling, wings fluttering. Life pulsed everywhere, but so did death. The high oxygen levels that fed these giants also made the world incredibly flammable. When lightning struck, entire forests could erupt in flames. The fires roared through the swamps, devouring everything in their path. Yet the forest always returned, reborn from its own ashes. It was during this time that the foundations of modern ecosystems were laid. The Carboniferous world created vast deposits of peat that, over millions of years, compressed into the coal we mine today. Every time a forest burned or fell into the swamp, it left behind layers of carbon, locking away the excess oxygen that had fueled this world of giants. The Earth, in its slow rhythm, was balancing itself. But balance is never permanent. As the Carboniferous gave way to the Permian, climates shifted. The once wet jungles began to dry. Swamps turned into plains, and the endless ferns that had ruled for millions of years started to vanish. The air lost some of its oxygen, and the giant insects could no longer sustain their massive bodies. Meganeura disappeared from the skies, replaced by smaller, faster species, better adapted to the changing world. Arthropleura, the giant millipede, found itself stranded as the humid forests shrank. Without the damp shelters it needed, it too vanished into extinction. The forests that had once fueled the fire of life now became its graveyard. As oxygen dropped, the Earth's atmosphere became more stable, less explosive, but also less vibrant. The Age of Giants was ending. Yet even as these ancient creatures died out, they left behind something extraordinary. The planet itself had been transformed by their existence. The coal they created became the foundation for modern industry, the fuel that powers cities and machines. The oxygen they produced shaped the very air we breathe. Their extinction paved the way for the rise of new creatures, reptiles that could survive in drier climates, eventually giving birth to the age of the dinosaurs. The Carboniferous was both the beginning and the end of something immense, a world that taught life how to grow large and powerful, and how to fall back when the balance tipped. Still, it is easy to imagine what it must have been like to stand in those primeval forests at their peak. The sound alone would have been overwhelming: the buzzing of countless wings, the croaking of amphibians, the rustle of enormous leaves. A shaft of sunlight pierces the canopy, catching the metallic glint of a dragonfly's wing as it hovers motionless, waiting to strike. A shadow moves below. A giant centipede slides effortlessly across a fallen log, its armor gleaming in the damp air. The forest hums with energy, each breath heavy with life. The Carboniferous Earth was alive in ways that defy comparison. There were no mammals, no birds, no dinosaurs, only this ancient kingdom of insects and plants, of amphibians and shadows. Evolution had not yet learned subtlety. Everything was exaggerated, extreme. The smallest creatures could fly higher than any before them, and the largest crawlers ruled the ground like armored trains. It was a laboratory of excess, where life experimented without restraint. Beneath the ground, roots tangled into vast networks, turning soil into a living web. The air shimmered with moisture, and clouds gathered endlessly above, feeding rain back into the cycle. From space, the planet would have looked like a green jewel, pulsing with storms and oxygen. It was a self-sustaining engine of growth, running at full speed. But even engines burn out. Volcanic eruptions began to shift the climate. Mountains rose, disrupting weather patterns. Rivers changed course. The once uniform forests began to fragment. Amphibians, dependent on water for their eggs, struggled to adapt as ponds dried up. Reptiles, with their tough eggs and scaly skin, began to take their place. The rule of the giant insects was drawing to a close. The torch of dominance was quietly being passed to creatures that could withstand drought and heat. By the end of the Carboniferous, much of what defined the world had vanished. The lush swamps had turned into vast floodplains and deserts. The air was thinner, the skies were quieter. The planet had entered a new phase. But the fossils buried in those ancient layers still tell the story of that forgotten kingdom. The impressions of giant leaves remain pressed into stone. The wings of Meganeura are preserved like delicate glass, each vein a perfect record of a creature that once ruled the sky. The trackways of Arthropleura cut across ancient mudflats, their rhythmic patterns showing how it moved. Through them, we glimpse a world so alien, and yet so crucial to the one we know. Every breath we take carries the legacy of that time. The air we breathe, the fuel that drives our machines, the very forests that still cover the earth, they are all gifts from the Carboniferous. It was a world of giants, of monsters that were not cruel but simply vast, shaped by nature's excess. The dragonflies and centipedes of that age remind us that the planet's balance is fragile, that what thrives today can vanish tomorrow. When we look at a dragonfly hovering over a pond, or a centipede crawling under a rock, we are seeing the descendants of a world that once pulsed with life far beyond our scale. They are survivors, reminders of an ancient time when the air itself made creatures grow to impossible size. The terrifying age of giant insects may be gone, but its story remains written in every coal seam and every breath of air. The earth remembers. The forests that burned, the swamps that shimmered, the wings that once darkened the sky, they all whisper the same truth. Life is always changing, always reaching, always daring to become something larger. In that long-vanished world, nature dreamed on a colossal scale. And though those giants are gone, their echoes still linger in the heartbeat of every living thing. The dragonflies may be smaller now, the centipedes more modest, but their legacy endures in every rustle of leaves, in every flicker of wing light above the water, in every reminder that Earth has always been, and always will be, a planet of transformation.